Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is the Dao De Ching. We'll be continuing with verses 44, 45, hopefully 46 and 47. We will start by everybody having an opportunity to read their favorite version. If you go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom. And then after we're done reading, we won't have any comments immediately thereafter. We'll go to Jason's translation. He will walk us through the translation. We'll have comments from Aman. After the comments from Aman, we will then open it up for comments at large. And then we ask that you keep your comments to 1 to 2 minutes. And on topic to that particular verse, there'll be opportunities to have discussions afterwards if you wish to elaborate further on a particular verse. So with that, why don't we start with so why don't we start with Juan, and then we'll go with Peggy, and then we'll go with Peter, and followed by Evanik.
Okay, so translation by Professor Most Roberts, stanza 44. Is the name of the man the more precious? Does the man or his goods count for more? Does the gain or the loss bring more pain? Extreme economies entail great waste, and excess holdings heavy losses. But the humbling is spared by few ones, a miscarriage by knowing the limits. Thus one can abide and endure.
Thank you, Juan. Next up is Peggy.
Okay, this is Stephen Mitchell. Fame or integrity, which is more important? Money or happiness, which is more valuable? Success or failure, which is more destructive? If you look to others for fulfillment, you will never really be fulfilled. If your happiness depends on money, you will never be happy with yourself. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you.
Thank you, Peggy. So next up, we'll go with Evanik, followed by myself.
So at the request of Jason, this is the Tao of Christ, a Christian version. Verse 44. Which is more important, your reputation or your life? Which is more valuable, your life or your money? Choose life and lose things. Choose things and lose life. Which brings more suffering? The one who wants to be famous gives up what is of greater value. The one who loves wealth gives up greater riches. The one who is content with what he has feels no shame or want. The one who knows when to stop is free from the dangers of desire. It lives a long and happy life.
Thank you, Evanik. Peter.
For Jia Fu Feng in Jane English. Fame or self, which matters more? Self or wealth, which is more precious? Gain or loss, which is more painful? He who is attached to things will suffer much. He who saves will suffer heavy loss. A contented man is never disappointed. He who knows when to stop does not find himself in trouble. He will stay forever safe.
Who did yours?
Stephen Mitchell.
Actually, PJ, do you want to read yours or?
Thank you. I think mine is very similar to others. I may skip that. If I see something different from others, I may share mine.
Very good.
Yeah, mine will be very similar to the one that.
Yeah, I guess he dropped off. Okay.
Sorry.
So I'll read the. Has anybody read the J.H. McDonald yet?
No.
No. Okay. Which is more important, your honor or your life? Which is more valuable, your possessions or your person? Which is more destructive, success or failure? Because of this, great love extracts a great cost, and true wealth requires great loss. Knowing when you have enough avoids dishonor, and knowing when you have to stop will keep you from danger and bring you a long, happy life. So from there, I will turn it over to Jason. Unless there's anybody else in the chat.
Jason, did you want me to read?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Just wanted,
I'll read my copy. You can share yours.
just 1 minute.
Chapter 44.
Aman, can you share your screen? For some reason, let me
Yeah.
see.
Hang on a second. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Chapter 44, Knowing When to Stop. Reputation or life, which do you hold more dear? Life or wealth, which do you want more? Gaining or losing, which do you worry about? Therefore, extreme cherishing leads to great spending. Excessive hoarding leads to heavy loss. Knowing contentment, one can avoid disgrace. Knowing when to stop, one can avoid danger. Knowing these, one can endure long.
Yeah, thank you, Aman. Sorry, for some reason, my screen, I cannot share screen.
If you go
Yeah,
to
just can
you should be able to highlight though in the Google Doc, and it should show up here.
No, the reason is I broke my computer, so I get a new computer, and then there's some setup I haven't done yet. So, so just leave the screen for a while before I figure out. So, this one is very short, but I don't want to take too much time to talk this one because I really like this chapter. Few things I like to talk about is. This one start from asking 3 questions, right? Reputation or life, which is more dear, okay? So I think the answer is the latter, right? The life is more dear. Life or wealth, which one
Sorry.
you want more, right? So apparent is life, right? So here, sun usually translated as a body, but I believe in Taoism, sun, the body means life. So I will translate as life. The third question will be tricky question. Some doing like gaining life, lose money, but if you look at the original text, it doesn't say anything. It just say gaining or losing. Which do you worry? Bing means worry. Which you worry more? So this one is a very tricky question, right? You want gain or you want lose? I think that I would like to tie this one to, I think 48, we talk about the pursuing knowledge is the process of increasing. Pursuing Tao is the process of decreasing. So gaining or losing, which one you want? I think that's a tricky question because you really don't know. But here it's going to answer, right? The answer is extreme cherishing leads to great spending. If excessive holding lead to heavy loss. Okay, so too much on one thing, it will cause the problem on the other side. So I think that's the teaching. So if you read this one, then you will know it's difficult to answer the question, gaining or losing, right? And then the next message is also important. The last line in the Chinese or last 3 lines, knowing contentment, one can avoid disgrace. Knowing when to stop, one can avoid danger. Okay, contentment, I think most of people can understand. You have to know contentment. But I think the important thing I like to put here is knowing when to stop. I think that's very important in the Taoism thinking. You need to stop sometime. Okay. Unlike if you read the Confucius, the Great Learning, you will see it's not Confucius. Confucius' grandson or Zhengzi's disciple is considered important Confucius text. Also talk about stop, but in Confucius' teaching, you stop at the perfect good, in the extremely good. So you can see, compare these two, you will see the difference attitude. In Confucius' point of view, or Confucius school point of view, you stop at the perfect time or extreme good. But in Taoism, you need to know when to stop. Okay, in a way, you should, before you start, you know where you want to stop. That's my understanding on this one. The last line, one can endure long. I put the parentheses here in the beginning because in the Chinese text, doesn't say anything. It just says, knowing contentment, one can avoid disgrace. Knowing when to stop, one can avoid danger. Then all of a sudden talk about one can endure long. I believe it means you can live longer, but I kind of thinking about not necessarily means live longer. You can be it can be sustainable. So that means you doing business, doing work, doing some work. You want to make sure the job and you as a doer is sustainable. In a way, it's live longer. In a way, it's preserve yourself. That's I need to say for this one. So Among, and then we go to comment. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll stop sharing so I can multitask without disrupting the whole process. Because I apparently missed the lesson here, which it reminds me of a story that I heard about Joseph Heller, who is the author of the book Catch-22. They turned it into a film. It made millions for, a producer. The story is that he and a bunch of other people were at a dinner party at this producer's house, this man who's made multiple millions off of his intellectual property. And the producer stands up and has to leave the room to take a phone call. And one of the dinner guests says, "Joe, doesn't it piss you off that that guy has made millions on your idea, more than you'll ever make on your book?" And Joseph Heller picked up a glass and he said, "Yeah, but I have something he doesn't have. Enough." I think that is the overall message here. Knowing when to stop, knowing when enough is something that brings a satisfaction that no amount of avarice hoarding could ever fill.
Thank you, Aman. So now go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat or raise your hand in Zoom to comment on number 44. So first up, we have Peter, followed by Kwan.
So I definitely do think that the central impact of this stanza is about asking what is enough, and for that being asked in the deepest parts of ourselves as a functional, rather than what is a right answer, what is our relationship towards prudence, towards this idea of where do we draw the line? And all different people in life will try to say, you should draw the line here, you should draw the line there. And I think it is important that we figure out, based on the depth of our honesty, where that line is now and where it could be later. And I think it is that sense of this idea of, in the Greek idea of nothing to excess, that what does it mean to have too much or too little of something in regards to the balance about what we most care about. And I do think that is important, this idea of we always have limitations on all of our cares, because to go overboard on any one thing, even if it may seem to be a good, may lead towards, as the stanza talks about, being too attached to a thing. Even if we think it is a good thing, it ends up being its own path to hell in relationship towards coveting it, trying to protect it, trying not to lose it, and then the detriment of losing it. So I think it is that type of grasping, holding, maintaining, that it's easy to try to justify that to a good object, to a good attachment. And I do think that in and of itself, it is still goes into this way of more, and justifying however noble that greed. And I think it is important to, I think what is the standard asking is to reflect on, what is enough, when is enough, so that we can start beginning to explore where satisfaction will come versus always holding out, because we can just become addicted to any object.
So next up we have Juan. Shrikant, I see you've joined. And I'm tempting to make you co-host now, but
what's the order of people now?
you're seeing them right now.
Okay, very good. So Ebony, go ahead. Thanks, Joe.
I think Quan was next.
Quan was next. Quan, go ahead.
Yep.
All right. So what I wanted to say that in stanza 44, you have 3 questions and you have kinds of 3 answers. But I would say that the last, the 7th line is interesting because it is stating by knowing the limits. And I would say that by knowing the limits can be answered at different stages of epistemological development precisely. Because it is quite well known that in the psychology of investment, for example, and here that is what I would call the most basic answer and not very evolved in inverted comma. Inside in the psychology of investment, there are people who fear more loss and there are people who love more gains, okay? So some investor will not take big risks because they cannot endure, they cannot bear the idea of loss. So they wouldn't say that it's enough, I stay there, I will not take the risk of gaining, let's say, 3 millions, but by taking a big risk. So here, you have a kind of enough that is motivated by fear. That's a kind of knowing the limits. And it's not wrong, okay? It's better for someone to know his limits and that person doesn't want to lose rather than to hope maybe to gain. That's I would say one stage, one epistemological stage of knowing the limits. The other possible answer for knowing the limits is that is more advanced, if I may say so, is that when the person found the diamond in his pocket, okay? I think that you all know that metaphor that the masters of meditation gave to everyone since centuries, if not millennia. That metaphor, the diamond is precisely the pure awareness or the pure being. But as long as you did not get the diamond in your pocket, well, you will still want the power, the riches, and the reputation, and etc., etc. And in your pocket, meaning that you forgot that it's there, but one day you found a diamond in your pocket almost by accident. So by knowing the limits, it can be in the animal kingdom, fear, and that's okay too. I think I'm not judging anyone, okay? I think that someone knowing that he would not want to go further because he is fearful, it's very okay. And knowing the limit by discovering the diamond. The other thing also that I want to make a comment is about Sun Tzu, okay, the famous philosopher of the 3rd century BCE, who was the teacher of Han Feizi and of Li Su. Li Su being the advisor of the first emperor of China. That Sun Tzu was very famous because he think contrary to most Confucianist philosophers that the nature of man is bad and is not good, contrary to most Confucianist philosophers. But what is interesting here is that that Sun Tzu has an interesting interpretation concerning that stanza, okay? Because in the writing of Sun Tzu, who borrowed heavily from Laozi, but for purposes opposite to Laozi, one finds a sense of productive power, making the self-limiting economics of Mozi and Laozi seem obsolete. So for Sun Tzu, the human economy is not antagonistic to nature, but rather creatively integrates itself with nature, drawing upon nature for expansion and improving nature in the process. The final object of Sun Tzu's philosophy is the conquest of the 10,000 things, okay? Because often for those who don't know Chinese philosophy, they would make the Chinese comparison between Chinese philosophy and Western philosophy by saying that Chinese philosophy is more for espousing nature and Western philosophy is more for conquering nature. Well, it's not true, okay? Because in Chinese philosophy, you have a major philosopher called Sun Tzu, who was for conquering nature, but in a harmonious manner. So Sun Tzu's philosophy is the conquest of the 10,000 things, a conquest that envisions their use for human beings rather than their own independent self-development. Of course, Lao Tzu would have pulled out his hair for that kind of stuff, but once again, it's a sub-development of that stanza. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwon. Next up is Evanique, Peichi, Nick, and Cho. Evanique.
Yeah, when we were reading this, the first thing I thought about is, first thing I think you have to know, what do you want for your life? Like, what is your purpose? What are you living for? And that helps you make those decisions that, they're asking you to make in this passage, which is, to judge what is more important in your life. For some people, reputation is more important than their life themselves. Like, their reputation is who they are, their character. So would they rather have their character or their reputation, or would they rather lose it? And I think the reputation is so hard because it's what other people think of you, but it's also your character in the sense that people who know you know who's the real you or not. And if it's someone you know well and they think, your character is bad, there's something off there. So that's what I was thinking with that. And then I was thinking after that about little choices that one makes in their life, because most people don't live life and be like, oh, I'm just going to go off the edge today and desire everything and, just not care about anything else. They don't want to go to that extreme, but it's the little choices. You make one small choice and one small choice becomes a bigger choice and a bigger choice, and then it snowballs. So I was thinking of that, and I was like, well, the little choices is what I think the Tao is really asking of us to make, and to think about these questions when you're making those choices, because they all ultimately build up to your life. The little choices is what is made up when you talk about, one's life. And then knowing when to stop. I think, somebody had used the one example, and it made me think of Michael Jackson, the singer. The one thing they said that some people would say that kind of drove him mad a little bit, because he was a genius, is that he couldn't top his own self. He was one of the greatest artists or greatest entertainers in the world. And he was number one. And his number one album was Thriller back in the 80s, I know. But he could never top himself. Every other record, he couldn't make those record sales that he did in Thriller. Now, to be fair, he made great record sales and he topped artists when he came out with records for a long time, but he couldn't top his own self. And ultimately, I think that's a story about when do you stop? Like when do you stop pursuing it, or when is enough? And I think that's a good question a lot of people brought up. Like, what is enough? When is enough? And I think if you go back to what do you value, if you answer those questions in the Tao, then you know what's enough for you. And it's different for everybody. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Thank you. Next up is Peichi. Peichi, go ahead.
Thank you. I think this verse, the takeaway message for me is that knowing your limits or when to stop and be content. Now, the knowing your limit or knowing when to stop, this is actually repeated twice in the book. And the first is in 32, and is in relation to the understanding that as a being, there is a start and there is an end. So knowing your limit can be infer that knowing when is your end. You have a limit because you have an end of life. And now the first paragraph about the questions is really related to that. Whether reputation or your body, whether your body or the material goods and the loss and gain. And the following line really clarify what what is behind that question. Is that whatever you hold the most dear, it will cost you the most. So because you have a limit, so careful which one you choose, whether reputation or whether your body, whether your material goods. Material goods, there are so many, and are you going to accumulate those? And to accumulate those, it will cost you most, and you will basically die with the things. You will lose as much as you collect. I think that's the centerpiece of the verse. Thank you.
Thank you, Peichi. Thank you. It's a great observation. Thank you. Next up is going to be Nick, Joe, and David. Nick.
Yeah, thanks. I want to follow up on Peter's reference to the Greeks. So this passage seems to explore the limit of the edge of one's behavior or pursuit, rather than the idea of golden mean somehow. So I'm just curious whether the more knowledgeable members here know that the Tao Te Ching doesn't pay much attention or doesn't focus too much on the idea of middle of the road, the golden mean. Rather, it pursues the conceptualization of the edges of things.
Yeah, that's a great question. If Jason or Aman want to address it, or Peichi wants to address it, go ahead.
I can very briefly address it. I'll let others speak to it as well. The idea of a golden mean is very Greco-Roman, and it has a bit of a parallel in Buddhism with the middle path. Buddhism, in conversation with Taoism, gives rise to Zen Taoism. And so there's almost a slush where you could find Taoists who would say, yes, the mean is what it means to be in Wu Wei. But really looking at the ancient text and the tradition, the mean was not what was after anyone was after. You were striving to do less. It was an effort of being less effortful at all times. And so there's always a little less you can do. There's always a little less effort. You can hit that cue ball just a little less hard and still get that same break, is the pursuit. And it's a pursuit that you can't achieve. You can just continually pursue it through a life.
Peiji, would you like to comment on this?
Thank you. My understanding through the book is that the center message is about the Wu Wei. So it not really advocates anything. The book is really is a make observation, but the emphasis is on Wu Wei, which means mindfulness, which means don't engage your intellect, don't make a mental effort, just follow your awareness. So you can forget all about the terminology, about the doctrine, follow your awareness. I think that's what the Wu Wei is about, because the awareness knows everything, will make you aware what you need to know. And naturally, it will make you not extreme.
Thank you. Thank you, Peiji. Next up, Jason and Quan commenting on this. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a two. Okay, I think this a two different way to look at this text. Okay, right now I can share my screen. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, I assume we can see the screen, right? So, oh, sorry, this chapter, right? Okay, the words he used. Okay, I'm sorry, I have to stick with what's the word show. It says 知止, that means no, 止 means stop. Okay, so here I think I would say this text, this chapter is talking about stop, where to stop or when to stop. Just like everything talk about the Michael Jackson situation, the thrill. Okay, if you look back, you know, oh, I should stop there. But when Michael Jackson is breaking the record in the thrill, he doesn't know whether or not he can make another one. So he doesn't know where to stop. So here's the key. How do you know where to stop? That's always a problem, right? So Confucius, the answer would be much easier, which Michael Jackson followed. Okay, he is going to the perfect good, 止于至善, stop, rest at the perfect good. So he will keep pursuing until perfect, but unfortunately, we don't know when it's perfect. So that's the way I look at this one as this one of the wisdom to know when. Of course, you can say that's the limit because you know your own limit capability. Okay, I think Peggy talked about this, right? Talk about your personal limit. So I know how much I can do, so I limit in some way. So that's another way to look at this same text. That's I like to say here too about how to interpret this text. But I just want to say the Chinese word to say is stop. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Quan, would you like to comment on this one?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to say that the Greek notion of medan agan, to be exactly in the middle, versus is rather reminiscent of the Ta Shui, of the great learning, when one of the suggestion was to balance your mind, if you remember. Okay, so the stages of the development of the epistemological growth, one of the stage is to put order in your daily life, to be sincere, to develop your understanding, but ultimately to balance your mind. And I think that the advice coming from the Ta Sui is much closer to the great Medan Agan, because that Medan Agan had political purposes as the balance your mind in Confucianist advice. In Lao Tzu, I would risk to say that knowing your limits has a paradoxical understanding, because knowing your limits at the first level is understood naturally at knowing what are your capacity, what is the volume, what is the space within which you are comfortable, okay, to use the expression going beyond your comfort zone, okay? So knowing your limit spontaneously will make us think to our comfort zone and to not go beyond our comfort zone. But I would risk to say that knowing your limits here can be interpreted completely in the other sense, in the sense that know that you have no limits in your pure consciousness, in your true reality. Okay, so, and I would like to finish by taking 30 seconds by reminding a story that everyone know, and please, Jason, don't accuse me to use Buddhism in a Taoist group. So, but the story is known by everyone. It's the guy who is just staying there, let's say, in a road, and you have a first person asking him, but what are you doing here? Are you waiting for a friend? The guy say, no, I'm not waiting for a friend. You have a second guy asking him, what are you doing here? Are you waiting for the rain? And he said, no, I'm not waiting for the rain. Maybe it's not for the rain, but I just invent, okay? And a third guy would say, but what are you doing here? Are you looking for your cow? And he said, no, I'm not looking for my cow. So I think that it's one of the anecdotes that illustrate perfectly the notion of Wu Wei, meaning just being and not absorb in an activity or a goal-oriented activity, as in modern psychology we say, okay? Just being and not absorb in goal-oriented activities. So I stop here.
Thank you, Quan. So folks, sometimes if there is a question which I think is the heart of the issue, I will modify the order in order to kind of just focus on that one. So this was the case of that. Sorry about the people who are in line. It's going to be Joe, David, Mark, and Peggy. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's already been said. The idea of Wu Wei is actually clear here from, and I think so far as I know that the word desire, I think, is used in a couple of the translations, and I know that that's not Jason's favorite word, but I think that it represents something much deeper, is this idea of self-mastery. And so that by understanding yourself is that you kind of know when to pursue something and not to pursue something. And that is where the idea of prudence factors into this. So if you consider the fact that you also, if you know what to pursue and not what to pursue, you also understand what is worth pursuing. So, but what your values are. And that is a very, very deep concept for an individual to actually understand, is that what is most important to you. And many times people will overvalue and pursue things in things that they forget why they're doing it in the first place. So an example would be if somebody is going to work and if they're working for money, but their money is supposedly in order to support their family, the true underlying value is the family, is the relationships that you have. So then a person that is wise, that actually can spot that, would actually know when to pursue and when not to, and how hard to go and how hard not to. So I think that these are the things that, when I think of a way, is when the idea of non-action is, when to act and when not to act. And I feel like in this passage, it's pretty clear on almost every of the translations where where we look for fulfillment and attached to things that were suffered, that make us suffer. These are externals that cause us to forget why we're pursuing something in the first place.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is David. David, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that this is pointing in a sense also one way of seeing dichotomies of these things that are being valued are their external evaluations that are being taken. What's the worth? What are you concerned? What are you valuing? Looking at the outer world, the material world, and looking at other people's opinions. And this is sort of concerned with almost the material existence, whereas the inner and self-evaluative things, the cores, the independence that you have, your spirit, yourself, this is turning inward. And it's a different awareness. And that sorting these out, I think, is a clarity. And maybe these terms, in terms of way, maybe they're getting at that also, that there are external things, and we also have voices in our heads. So these things are worthwhile. So we have to end up sorting out what's actually, we don't only have to come, I mean PG was saying, just it comes down to merely being aware. But we have to know, being aware, what's really inner and what is also impinging. We have to see those differences. So the awareness does have a certain intelligence that makes it a finer awareness. So we get those epistemic layers that Quan has talked about. So seeing in your awareness the source, the fundamental source of those values. So you, as Joe was saying, you prioritize. You now know these are from me and they're not external values. So I have my body and my spirit like working, they coordinate. I mean, if I haven't eaten for 3 days, that piece of bread is much more important than it would have been. And so it's not gluttonous to actually make that a priority. So I have my priorities before I'm acting. And I don't have to act in excess, which was, I wouldn't have recognized it if I hadn't turned in. So, and this is said in circles that I know through a little parable. It goes like this: about defining enough is actually almost a definition of enough. Who's the rich man? The one who can be satisfied, who can celebrate his portion. That's sounds like this message again. You've got this. Do you savor? I mean, that's wealth. It's the same story as Zaman in a certain way. Thanks.
Excellent point. Thank you. Thank you, David. Next up is Mark, followed by Penny. Mark.
Thank you, Shrikant. Great to hear everybody. My question is, Jason, going back to the beginning, you mentioned that you thought the answers to the 3 questions, I don't know if you said that they were clear, but you said that you should be picking your life. And I'm going to look at your translation right now. I know it's reputation or life. And I'm looking at a multi 8
Okay,
translation.
So you can see.
Yeah. And I'm wondering whether this question might be more difficult.
You mean even the first question is difficult? reputation or life?
Yes. And
Okay, go ahead.
there may be times, I'm thinking of one Athenian who chose to defend his reputation and lose his life.
Okay.
And there may be others. So I'm wondering, since chapter 43 ended with Wu Wei, whether finding our Wu Wei or being in harmony with Wu Wei or just being Wu Wei could make this choice difficult.
Okay, thank you, Mark. You always ask a challenging question. So let me try to answer, okay, your question. So, or comment, okay. So I will say the answer is obvious for the first question because we are reading Tao Te Ching. If we are reading Confucius Analect, I will agree with you because the name is important, rectification of name. So life is not that important. So Confucius may choose the former instead of later on the first question. Second, life of wealth, which one you want more? I think that's obvious question for capitalist society because money is more important. So, but in Taoism, I will assume the answer is the former because life is more important than the wealth or external good. And then the third question, I think that's a difficult question, gain or lose, which one you worry more? Okay, so that's my response to you. Anyway, thank you, Mark. Yeah.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Penny, Paul, and JP. Penny.
Okay. I just wanted to say that, and maybe because of this translation from Stephen Mitchell too, when talking about when to stop or something, I mean, he has translated, be content with what you have, rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. And Jia Fu Feng says, a contented man is never disappointed. And so I felt like there was that's kind of a synthesis for me of what it's trying to say is that one has to learn to be content with what one has. And that would kind of be following, I would say, the natural order of things because you've been given an allotment of things in the world. And if you can be content with those and move along with those, you'll be a contented person. So it's not just knowing how much you want, but I thought part of the emphasis was on being content with what you have already. And not trying to say, well, if I got this much, it would be good, or if I got this much, it would be good, but more the inner, looking at it internally and being content with what you have materially, and also then on the side of the inner side, being content with yourself and the life that you have. That's kind of what I thought.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Penny. Next up is going to be Paul, followed by JP. Paul.
Yeah, I think it's worth bringing in some research that I just wanted to let people know I'm aware of by Laurie Santos at Yale, who is a psychologist who studies the science of happiness. She tries to apply scientific methods to understanding this thing called happiness. And it could have gone either way. Like there's a very persistent idea in America that you get more money, you're gonna be happier. I mean, no matter how much you read the sacred texts, people sort of have a feeling that's right. But her research shows that if you look at emotional well-being, concentrating on emotions, a person might evaluate their own life in some way that says, I'm a success if they have a lot of money. But once you're above the pure poverty level, it makes a huge difference when you're struggling for survival. But once you get into what we might call the massive middle class, you know, and then the income numbers go up, there isn't a correlation to emotional well-being, which is exactly really what this is saying. So it's kind of proven out. I just thought that was interesting. Well, at least some people would argue that modern research, social science research, supports this verse.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. So it'll be JP, and then we will go to the next verse. JP, go ahead.
Hi, Shrikant. Thank you. You know, Shrikant, you know me a bit. I've been in some of these events. And Paul's here. He knows me a bit in some other ways too. And Evanique. And I know Joe and I have had a lot of personal conversations. He really knows me quite a lot. I realize fame isn't in those things which I want to call money or objects, but in how you reflect back to me who I am. My body or my life and my wealth and this. There's three me. There's a Tao me, there's I am me, and there's you are me. Because who you reflect back to me is who I get. Maybe some of you know I write poetry. Some of you may think I have horrible rhymes. Some of you may think it's very funny when I write my children's poetry in their rook. And you reflect that back, and then that becomes who I am. I become who I am not on my own, my I am me, but that thou art me comes into existence, and I become this other person. It's an image of me that you're seeing reflecting back to me. What am I going to be content with? Who I am? Who you say I am or need me to be because I've been that person? Or is it just that Tao that's always in existence? And that's who we all are. And that's what I'm trying to understand. Thank you.
Shrikant, you're muted.
Yeah. Yeah, before we move on, I thank you everyone for a lot of sharing and your interpretation. And all of a sudden, I realized the first one, all translation talking about reputation or life, which one is dear to you? I start to realize the first word could never means reputation. It could means the position, okay, you are taking. So that means your social position all your life. Which one is more important? Okay, that's just my thought I want to share, which is probably nobody say that. I'm not going to say that's right or wrong. I just want to share everyone. I realize that means, you know. So that's it, because I don't think during that time, reputation is a concept. Okay, that's my point.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. I just want to make one comment on what JP said. I think it's a very profound point of, you know, what is the role of conversation between two human beings in setting identities. Now, again, I don't understand the Tao too well, but I don't, like, for example, the Bible, the New Testament focuses a lot on that conversational part, kind of what goes on between two people. That conversation is at the heart of things. You know, even when you say word was with God, so it's like being face to face. That's a very large part of the biblical tradition. So I don't know, you know, there's so many interesting questions that come up that everybody brings up. So this is one of the questions that we will discuss at some point. Next up, we'll go to Allison, and then folks, we're going to go to number 45 because we are past the hour. Allison, go ahead.
I was just watching a show on this female narco named Griselda Blanco, and she was a big like drug lord in Miami in the 70s and 80s. And it was very interesting because there's this point where the other you know, narcos were all trying to get her out of the business, and they offered her $15 million to leave, and she refused. And it wasn't like, it was kind of interesting that her, in a way, her obsession with her reputation and the fact that she was the only woman who had ever done that, and that became more important than, you know, her life, because they were saying your life is going to be in danger if you don't bow out. You can bow out, you can, and you know, eventually she was caught because she just kept going. But it's kind of interesting that, you know, how the ego wants to just keep going and going and going, even when it's not safe at all, and there's an easy way out. But it's very interesting that, you know, watching this thing about these narcos is exactly, you know, what we have in the Tao. It's interesting.
Thank you, Alison. All right, folks. So now we are on to number 45. Would love to hear you guys read translations that you like. So go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to read a translation. We'll start with Peter. Peter, go ahead.
Jiu Fu Feng and Jane English. Great accomplishments seem imperfect, yet it does not outlive its usefulness. Great fullness seems empty, yet it cannot be exhausted. Great straightness seems twisted. Great intelligence seems stupid. Great eloquence seems awkward. Movement overcomes cold. Stillness overcomes heat. Stillness and tranquility set things in order in the universe.
Thank you, Peter. Next up is Evanique, Quan, Penny, and Cho. Evanique.
So this is from The Tao of Christ by Marshall Davis. Number 45. The perfect appears imperfect. That is its usefulness. Fullness appears empty. That is its value. Straightness seems crooked. Wisdom seems foolish. Truth sounds like gibberish. Movement conquers cold. Stillness conquers heat. Not power, but purity conquers the world.
Thank you, Evanique. Next up is Quan.
Translation by Professor Mose Roberts, stanza 45. Great successes may seem flawed, but their benefits injure no one. Great abundance may seem spent, but its supply is endless. Great honesty may seem unfair. Great eloquence like reticence. Great artistry like clumsiness. But they stand the trial of use. Keen cold yields to excitation, and heat of passions to repose. On reflection and repose rely, to rightly roam the world below the sky.
Thank you. Thank you, Quan. Next up is Penny, followed by Cho. Penny. Penny, you need to unmute.
Sorry now. J.H. MacDonald. The greatest accomplishments seem imperfect, yet their usefulness is not diminished. The greatest fullness seems empty, yet it will be inexhaustible. The greatest straightness seems crooked. The most valued skill seems like clumsiness. The greatest speech seems full of stammers. Movement overcomes the cold, and stillness overcomes the heat. That which is pure and still is the universal ideal.
Thank you, Penny. Next up is Joe. Joe, go ahead.
I'm trying to decide which one to read. I think I'm going to read the Ron Hogan because it was so close to actually Penny's translation that it's actually interesting to hear. The greatest achievements may look like mistakes, but you will always be able to build upon them. The fullest reserves may seem empty, but you will always be able to draw upon them. The straightest line looks crooked. The most skilled people come off as clumsy. The most eloquent people are usually silent. When it's cold, you can move around to stay warm. When it's hot, you should keep still and stay cool. But whatever the weather, if you stay calm, the world will sort itself out around you.
Thank you, Joe. All right, Jason.
Do you need me to show the screen again?
Wait a minute. My mistake. Peiji, would you like to read yours?
Oh, okay, thanks for asking. I have put my my verse there. It's similar to what Peter has shared, and I just want to emphasize the first part. The original text, Da, great. It really means the Tao.
Go ahead, Peiji. If you could just
okay. That which is most completed appears lacking, yet its usefulness remains unimpaired. That which is a fullest appears empty, yet its function is inexhaustible. That which is most straight appears bent. That which is most skillful appears clumsy. That which is most eloquent appears speechless. Movement overcomes cold. Stillness overcomes heat. Clarity and stillness embody the natural norm of the world. Now, just give a quick the explanation about the verse. It's talking about the way of the heaven, and because through the way of heaven, the universe, you will know the way of Tao.
Thank you.
That's why the first part and the second part seems not so connected when it comes to movement overcomes code, things like that. Thanks.
Thank you. Peiji, what we'll do is that in the future we'll just read the poem and we'll do all the discussion of the poem after Jason and Amon's translation. Let's follow the same format. I think it works really well.
Yeah, thank you.
Jason, go ahead.
Amon, you want to read, please?
Sure. Chapter 45, Clearness and Serenity. The great accomplishments appear incomplete, but their functionality is flawless. The great surpluses appear empty, but their functionality is inexhaustible. The great straightness appears crooked. The great skillfulness appears awkward. The great arguments appear inarticulate. Coldness overcomes heat. Serenity overcomes tumult. Clearness and serenity are the way to govern the world.
Thank you, Amon. First, I forget to mention, I always put the title on that. The title that's always the two Chinese words. I didn't do that. I'm not sure who did that. Could be Wang Bi. Okay, somebody know, please let me know. Somebody put the title on each chapter. Okay, traditionally the title. And sometimes I disagree, but do you know who? Kwang?
Yes, you're right, Jason. It's
Wang
the
Bi.
famous Wang Bi who lived only 23 years, but make a big difference in Chinese civilization.
I know, yeah. Okay, so he put that. So I also try to translate the Chinese word, okay, through the title. So to me, it's kind of important. So this one, my reading could be different than most of the translator, okay, or interpreter, because I see this word 天下 under the heaven. So whenever I see 天下 under the heaven, I will see this one is talking about politics, is teaching the ruler how to deal with this world. Okay, that's my position, because I do see 天下 under the heaven means the political world. And the heaven and the earth means the nature world. So this one, to me, I like this one a lot. Okay, so first few things talk about, I think that is similar. It's no surprise. I assume everyone sort of expert or know thing about Taoism. The great accomplishment appear incomplete, but the functionality is flawless, right? And the great surpluses appear empty, but the functionality is inexhaustible. Okay, here, I think most of translation in the book doing empty. But I just want to tell you, if you know Chinese word, in the whole Dao De Jing text, there's no Chinese word called "hong," which is empty. There's no this word. And the word here is chong. Remember, if we 2 chapters ago, last week, we talked about this word, chong, as immerse. So let me explain one more time. This word is being used as empty in Tao Te Ching. Because this word means, if you can see what Peggy holding, that's like a cup, right? So that's inside. Okay, so like a small cup, the inside is empty, right? So he showed everyone that's an empty inside. So that's the concept of empty. So I kind of like to separate the emptiness of Tao and the emptiness of Buddhism. Okay, emptiness of Buddhism, sunyata, basics is the talking about non-being, nothingness, this kind of emptiness. But in Taoism, they have wu as nothing, negation, non-being, right? But use chong, okay, this word as empty. But this empty is just, it's not non-beings empty. It's like the cups empty inside. The purpose of empty is functionality because it's empty, so it's useful. Same as our room, which is empty inside, so people can live inside. So I hope I explained the difference of emptiness between Taoism and the Buddhism. That's the difference, because the Taoism emptiness is for its functionality. That's why it said the great surplusness, surpluses appear empty, but the functionality is inexhaustible, just like the cup. You can drink wine, you can drink water, you can scoop the water from outside, you can do many, many things because it's empty. So that's the difference on that. The great straightness appear crook, the great skillful appear awkward, the great argument appear inoculate. I think that's only the different translation. The next slide, I believe if you pay close attention to your text, it's a little bit strange. So some scholar will put, I put a parenthesis here. Okay, the word order has been not correct. So people, you know, I'm not sure which one should be right, but I will take this one, the one in the parentheses. Basically, it would be make more sense if you read this way. That means the coldness will overcome the heat, right? Cold overcome heat. Serenity will overcome the tumult. Okay, so the dynamic moving, if you know molecular, right? The heat is caused by the moving of molecule, right? So coldness will overcome the heat. The serenity will overcome the tumult or the movement. So the message is very political, right? Here it's talking about everything doesn't look like you expected, okay? It's straight, it may look like crook. It's real skillful, may look awkward, right? So tell you that appearance is different than essence. Then you talk about the cold, the serenity can overcome something dynamic. So finally, talk about clearness and the serenity are the way to govern the world. The way I interpret here is since 天下 means under the world, which is political world, and the 正, okay? Because most of translator or interpreter will see this 正 as rectification, which is Confucian's understanding. But I believe this 正 is the same as the other 正, which means governing. Okay. I checked most of the part. I believe this 正, this word, is not justice, not rectification, because I would say Taoism is immoral. Okay, so justice, righteousness may not be the right thing for here. So I think that it's talking about you can govern the world, by which means by serenity, calmness, clearness, you can do this one. In the way, this message is talking about Wu Wei, okay? Unlike the 44, I don't see 44 talking about Wu Wei. 44 is talking about personal practice. 45 is more political, basic talk about Wu Wei, so you can govern or in charge or take care of the world. How does this part, the political part, connect with the beginning? So that's typical Taoism or Dao De Jing logic. Tell you about the natural world or metaphysical idea, then drop what they want to teach. And especially on the second part, the third part, it's very political because it tells you that's the way to deal with the business or politics. So I stop here, and Aman, please.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, I'm very proud of our translation here. This one, I especially like the end because you retained those terms, coldness, overcoming heat, which is pedantic, but it's one of those things where every other translator is very, very eager to tease out other meaning for that and find a more cryptic way or a way that better it reflects their interpretation. I loved that interpretation of frigidness and fervency. I was so tempted to not suggest going with the cold and heat, but I liked that you retained it in the parentheses because I do think it is it makes it much clearer. And when you actually read some of the other translations, or if you read it both ways, first thinking frigidness overcomes fervency, to a lot of us, especially contemporary readers, that would seem sort of awkward, odd, but it fits with the rest of the stanza because what this stanza is driving at is to instruct someone to violate their own expectations. Take what you expect to be the case and invert it. You think great accomplishments happen because of X. Really, it's Y that is responsible for it. You think that, all of this will get you means. Really, what will is letting go of these expectations. When you really get the valuable thing, it'll appear crooked. It'll appear awkward. When you hear real good advice, it may seem inarticulate, kind of like me teaching a class before the coffee hits my brain. Sometimes genius comes out of there, and other times it sounds great up here, but not so much out there until I re-say it. So this whole chapter is about instructing the person, the princeling, who is the target audience, to violate their initial expectations. And you would expect fervency, action, vigor to be what sees you through the day. We're actually told that now. But Lao Tzu really drives home a fundamental metaphysical point that endures all the way through to action, which is entropy. It's a law. It's going to win. Don't think that your, can-do attitude is always going to carry the day, because really entropy is a law. But what does that teach us? It teaches us that stillness, serenity, peace and quiet are the way to be a good leader. Because if you have someone in charge who is engendering peace and quiet from the top. It lets everybody else in the world get on with it. If they're too noisy, if there's too much tumult at the top, there's no peace and quiet, and everybody spends their time staring up going, oh God, when's the next catastrophe going to happen? I really like this chapter. I like the way it was translated. I like sort of the synthesis that was made here. And yeah, that's what I will say about that. I'm excited to hear everyone else.
Yeah, before that, one comment I forget to make about if you look at the Chinese word here, there's a lot of da, right? Da, 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 right? That's all great. All right. So just like Peggy talked about, Peggy will interpret this one da as a Dao. I think he talked about last time or 2 weeks ago. Da as Dao. I just want to mention this interpretation. I heard this interpretation from one professor from National Taiwan University. Okay, because he studied the Southern literature. So Dao and the Da, they have the similar pronunciation. So he believed the sound of Taoism teaching is very important. So I believe he will agree with Peggy talking about Da is Dao. Okay, but here I still translate as the great, and a lot of the translation will translate as extreme or the most. Okay, and the reason is this, because the Da a lot of time can be read as Tai, which is the word with a dot underneath. So in the ancient time, these two words sometimes are interchangeable. So if you read as instead of Da, you read as Tai, okay, that means it's extreme. Okay, if it's extreme, so that means everything go extreme, there will be other way. But I will kind of disagree on this interpretation because it become not political teaching. Okay, that's pretty sure because I see the word 天下 as the under the heaven, which is political meaning, incarnation. So that's the reason. Okay, I stop here. And
I did have one thing I forgot to say, and you're saying 天下 reminded me. I wanted to comment on that phrase and your interpretation of it. Excuse me, because I agree with you. It is a euphemism in a sense, in much the same way we could say our country, and it carries a certain weight and connotation, and everyone knows very clearly. But when we use a term like our land, we're still talking about the same thing, but we're choosing words that spin it a different way in the mind of the recipient. And so when you talk about 天下, all under heaven, or everything that is under heaven, it is a sort of euphemism for the governable world, the world that is within the realm of the emperor. But it is loaded language that has its own connotation. And so I absolutely wanted to bring that forward, because otherwise it's easy to say, where do you get governing the world from? Well, it's the same way, this land is your land, this land is my land. We could take that very pedantically, or we could understand, oh, there's context there.
Thank you, Amon. Folks, would love to hear your comments. We're going to go start with Joe, David, and Peter. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Amon and Jason captured much of what this is about, with the idea of how stillness and tranquility, and this is how people can lead. And I think that really think about this in terms of I like the way Amon had put it, where he said where something violates our expectations. And that's interesting because I think it is our preconceived notions that often cause many of our discomforts and many of our anxieties, that we determine what is good or bad based off of our preconceived notions, not necessarily off of what the actual act is. And that's a really important point, because this is where we often get into disagreements. So if I'm to say in one case that, wow, that was very brave, and another person were to say, wow, that was very foolish, well, if you're judging based off your preconceived notions instead of judging the act itself, then you are determining what is good or what is bad. And this is where you can kind of see in the Tao what it's saying, the straight and crookedness, these when your perception changes of what is actually good and what is bad, just judge it for what it is. And that stillness, that not bringing your baggage into a particular conversation or into a particular relationship even, then I think that in those instances, then I think that things become much more clear, and that stillness allows you to interact with people in a much more just way, if I will, go so far as to say. But I think that it is important, as as Mon was also saying, this stands up, is the only way we can actually then challenge our preconceived notions is by examining them based on the act itself that we're actually judging, not necessarily using our preconceived notions, not using our experiences. So I think that that's a very important distinction to be able to make. Examine the act for what it is. So anyway.
Thank you, Joe.
And that's held up in as well.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is David. David, go ahead.
Yeah, I like the way Joe said that. And taking on Iman's point, expectations were often violated. We would tend to expect to have to use power to accomplish our aims. And this is saying, take the path. That's the minimal. Act by don't acting. So, acting is not acting. So this is ringing like it belongs in here. But I bringing up this issue that kind of went back and forth between Jason and Iman. Is governing the world, which is literally here. Doesn't this apply to both in this kind of reading, to the sovereign and the individual ruling their own world, even if I'm not the emperor? Doesn't this lesson, isn't it equally applicable? Isn't it being taught to, both classes of listeners? That's my question.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. But I believe all the political philosophy is not practical, right? So yeah, I have to agree with you. It's not practical. And the same as Confucius talking about virtue, ren, benevolence, all this one, filial piety or called xiao, can, if you are a filial piety a person, can you become the great ruler? That's a big question, right? But we can say that's the idea, their idealist, same as Plato's Republic, okay? Philosopher king. Is that real? Is that political? Is that practical? The same question, okay? But I think let's reflect their thinking. I think in 2 weeks, Huang in Saturday going to talk about the first dynasty or first major dynasty, Zhou dynasty in Chinese history. You will see since Huang and I working on the presentation, so you can see the ancient time is so peaceful, okay, because they have the king, they have a lot of feudal lord, everybody just and during Confucius' time and the Laozi's time, there's a lot of war, people try to fight each other. So they only thing, they don't know American, they don't know Greek, they don't know Europe, only thing they know is the past. They don't know Indian also. So they don't know it's the past. They say, past is a good time. Then they try to find the reason. Confucius will say, because old time we all follow the ritual, the benevolence, ren, 君子, the gentleman, we all have this. That's why everybody is peaceful. Okay, Laozi will say the different way because they practice Wu Wei. They don't bother you. They don't interfere people. That's why they are peaceful. I think they all come with their solution, with their limited information.
Thank you, Jason. Next up is Peter, followed by Quan. Peter.
I suppose I'm going to try to, a lot has been said, and I'm going to try to create a slightly different interpretation. And I do think it's important to focus on this idea of how things seem and taking that as face value in relationship to the twisted, stupid, and awkward in regards to our relationship with the Tao, rather than trying to see beyond it, trying to see the straightness instead of the twisted, trying to see the eloquence and not the awkward, and taking that as in regards to its most manifestation and treating it seriously. Because I think if we do say that the Tao is the eternal now, just as a hypothetical kind of definition, there is then the qualities of the now, right? For it is all filled with endless things that are twisted, stupid, and awkward. And that will always be in one form or another. And so as such, the ideas in our mind of these idols, these idea of these perfectly harmonious structures, this of complete eloquence, complete straight lines as such, trying to achieve that, conjuring all this fire to achieve that, endlessly trying to get rid of the edges, make a polished surface that is, perfect in every way, and endlessly trying to polish. I think there is that sense of what is the meaning of allowing that the twisted, stupid, and awkward are perfect in of themselves, like this idea of, going off into nature and seeing trees. There's almost no straight lines in nature. And so as such, could it mean to look at humans as being a part of nature in that kind of way, in regards to all of the complexity that makes up our own inner lives, as well as society and people? And I suppose the metaphor that I wish to jump for now is this idea of the painting, that the painting is a mess of colors and shapes. And what if every single moment is its own painting being painted, compulsively, intelligently, however? And I feel that it is this idea of worshiping stillness is a form of trying to get rid of the paint on the canvas. We need to continue get rid of the paint because the blank canvas is perfect, right? Let's just continue trying to stop painting so that stops happening. And I feel it's this idea of, yes, the blank canvas is behind every painting, but can you see how the blank canvas supports every single painting in its own unique way? Must the paint be demonized? Is the question that I really wish to, if I may, challenge all of you in relationship to your relationship with the Tao.
Hey, Peter, great observation and great question. And if anybody wants to address it at any point of time, you're welcome to do that. And it's very, very deep. So I thank you, Peter. Next up is going to be Quan. Go ahead.
This stanza is very interesting for me on a personal level because of the title, okay? Clearness and Serenity, the two Chinese words being Qing, Jing. And I would say that the Ta or the Tai, because Ta means great and Tai means supreme, right? So there's a kind of complementarity between the two. There's a nuance. But I would say that the great or the supreme, I agree that it is an indication for infinite awareness. And when I say why it has a lot to do on a personal level, is when I was educated in the classical Chinese environment, what was focused on a practical manner was that before you act, you have to be aware of your inferior emotions, okay? And what would wash you from those inferior emotions is precisely to be connected to the Ta, to the timelessness, to the pure awareness. Because you cannot act if you are not on that pure awareness. And precisely when I think that it is deeply political, because once again, it was a teaching that was directed to the nobility at the time, because the central understanding of all the teaching, either by Confucius or by Laozi, even if it's expressed differently, all the classical Chinese teaching, I would say, is the question of personal sovereignty. Of course, we are speaking here of kings, of emperors, of sovereign, but the deep layer of that teaching is that you cannot be a political sovereign if you're not the sovereign of yourself first. So everything here is how you can manage your epistemological development or your epistemological growth in order that you can have a vision from above. And since you have a vision from above, you are sovereign of yourself, and then you would be capable to be a sovereign of XYZ political entities, because precisely you are rooted in that Ta or that Tai, that great or that supreme. And because you are rooted there, you will have a broad vision, not only for yourself, but for everyone who will be in contact with you. So, and Wang Pi precisely had a short comment on the stanza, which goes in that direction through reflection and repose. So reflection or clarity, because the first word Ching means clarity or purity. So you imagine the surface of a lake that is clear, that is not muddy. Once again, that is a metaphor that is used a trillion times by the masters of meditation. And when the surface of that lake is not muddy and is not moving, is in repose precisely, the wise man attained to greatness because he has a great vision. And that was the command of Wang Pi that goes absolutely in the direction of that personal sovereignty. That is the absolute condition that you need to achieve before you can imagine to have political power. And I would take 30 minutes to finish. I would say that shunyata, the Sanskrit word for emptiness, that probably can be translated by formless. I agree with Jason's distinction. I think it's interesting, but I want to be a pain in the neck as usual for Jason. I would say that it can be also interpreted in the other way, because formless and emptiness in the sense physical emptiness, but allowing functionality, can be, we can have a rapprochement, because when you have a formless reality, it means that from formless reality, you can have many forms and many functions from that formless reality, basic substantial reality. And in the case of Chong, which is the emptiness because there's no water in the cup, it allows a space for functionality, but that space is the same space that the space of Shunyata or formless. But here it's a theoretical discussion, and I think that Jason's distinction is still very interesting. I stop here.
Yeah, Kwang, okay, thank you for the formless, but I just have to be picky. I think it's too Greek, so.
Thank you. Aman, go ahead.
Yeah, this conversation made me think a little bit about the direction I took the last time we did the Tao Te Ching, and how very often sort of the heuristic of where was the time and place and what was the audience was a major focus the last time. I wanted to steer away from that to contemporize this a bit about violating those expectations and knowing enough and being happy with it in real time. One of the things that I think absolutely drives my coworkers nuts is that I am not shy about telling them how much I make. That is something that you do not do in a business setting in modern America. But I just figure you should know what this institution is actually paying me for doing this. And that is something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, but it also kind of humbles them. I don't make nearly as much as my contemporaries. And so when they see me working and then they're like, and you only make this much? Yeah, I do. I'm doing it for a different reason. It's not for the paycheck, obviously, but the paycheck is enough. When I'm making enough, like, was it Paul who said it earlier, that the science bears out there is a threshold. If your basic needs are being met and you are able to meet, then going after that next promotion, going after that's a rat race I have never could have any truck with. As a Taoist, it kind of sickens me. The other way that this plays out in contemporary terms is that I make exactly half as much as my brother. We are both homeowners. I loan him money. I don't know why. I would think he should have the money to pay for his own, home owning catastrophes. But when fit hits Shan, he knows he can call me and I will cough up because I'm not buying new clothes. I get my new clothes at Christmas when people give them to me. I don't need a great many things for my happiness. And therefore I can save, and therefore he knows I've got a nest egg that he can tap when he needs to. I'm not horribly bitter about it. I just wish they'd stop buying curtains. But these are how these lessons, and this was asked, is this just about rulership, or can this be applied in your own life? This can be applied in everyone's life. You can rule all under heaven by not seeking to rule it, by not trying to control it, by not trying to be the orchestrator of it, by understanding the good and the bad, the tragedy and the highlights, and not succumbing to the marketing ploys of Evanique and the rest of the platforms that tell me for just $2.99 a month, you're going to get no ads. I hate you for giving me ads in the first place, but I can mute you. I can't fast forward you, but I don't have to listen to you. This is how you take enough, way, and apply it into your life. And so it's not necessarily about a means. It really is about sort of shaving away the excesses that you don't need, that you really don't need, to become very happy with what you have.
Thank you, Amon. So I'm going to comment very briefly on what Peter said, and then would love to hear what Peiji has to say about this verse, and then we'll go to Joe. So Peter, I really like what you said. I mean, it's in a very deep way. There is it's like Tao is like yes and. So I like the idea, that Jason said, replacing great with Tao. So I'm just going to use my favorite translation, and I'm just going to insert Tao and then just kind of address what you said. So Tao, which is perfectly whole, seems flawed, but you can use it forever. Tao, that's perfectly full, seems empty, but you can't use it up. Tao, the true straightness, looks crooked. Tao, the great skill, looks clumsy. Tao, the great eloquence, seems to stammer. So the deep thing here is that this is very much kind of the marriage of the universal and particular. So it's like there is the source and there is its manifestations, and it's one thing. Now you can look at one little part of it and say, oh, that is just stammering. Oh, that's not looking good. But that is part of this entire thing that is going on. So it is a very much of a this deep connection between the universal and particular. Kind of, it's almost like, in the New Testament, the idea is of theosis, of saying the particularization of the universal, something like that. So at some point, even the littlest of things is part of the Tao, and you can't. So the Tao is there in the littlest thing. The Tao is there everywhere. So it's that integration, and because it is integrated, it's everything. From different perspectives, it looks kind of straight and crooked at the same time. So that's what I would say. All right, Peachy, what did you think? I know you had raised your hand before, and I interrupted you when you're present, because we'll do the same structure. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. I was there was some question raised in relation to me, so I thought I was gonna make a quick feedback, but I will take the opportunity now. Firstly, let me recap what I understand in the verse 45. Particularly in relation to the character, the original text, the Da, the great. Like verse 41, Da, here have a double meaning. One is a great, the other is a Tao. Now, it's not my interpretation at all. It is in the book, verse 25. Remember in the verse 25, when the Tao is being referred to the absolute, that which is constant, it also used another word to refer to the same thing, which is a great. Because there is no better words, I call it Tao. I call it great. So here, great indeed is it's referring to the same thing as a Tao. And what you have just talked about, Tao as a as a straight line, Tao as a as a completed, exactly fits the context very well. This is one thing. The second one, in relation to the original text, the character Chong, Jason had an explanation, made an explanation. And I just made me realize that I want to share with you. Now, that character in the book has been interpreted as empty in most verses. It appears at least 3 times. Now, the character today, we use it as feel. Now, if you look at the form of the character, they have 2 parts. The left part, the 3 dots, representing water, the liquid. The right side is the middle. So the character originally being used as a verb to describe you feel the liquid, particularly the water, into the middle. Now, when it's been used to describe a state, adjective, and I believe the ancient used that word to describe something need to be filled. Hence, the empty, empty. So someone, when say, the cup, you say, fill, to fill. That means this is empty. I think that's how the ancient used that character. And obviously today we have another word for it, another word for empty. So that's my sharing. Again, I think the whole verse is about talking the way of the nature, the way of universe, because the way of universe follows the Tao. So by knowing the way of nature, we will know the Tao, because Tao is beyond the words. Yeah, I'm aware of Jason used alternative original text for instead of the movement overcome code and and the stillness overcome the heat. He used another one. I do, yeah, I'm aware of that. There is, but I won't have, I don't have any further comments on this.
Thank you.
And that's it from me. Thanks.
Thank you. Joe next. Joe.
Yeah, coming back to Peter's questions about whether or not, we apply this both, and we talked about how we have our preconceived notions, or I spoke about it earlier, about what is good and what is bad externally, but as well as you kind of apply that both internally as well. And if you apply that internally, then what does that look like? And it is an element of acceptance that you have for who you are. That is, there's a tranquility that does come along with that. So you stop judging yourself for everything you do and start accepting yourself for every action. You're not carrying necessarily the idea of what is good or what is bad. You're just accepting things for what they are. And then from there is a degree of stillness that you have, and that allows you to it's an element of freedom, let's just say. And it also speaks very much very closely to 45 as well, in the sense that, or 44, I'm sorry, as to not being worried about external things like fame or people's opinions or things along those lines, because that's often what informs what we think to be good or bad. And actually, in reality, that it's it's not necessarily, it's not the Tao. So it's not they're only words that individuals can actually use to determine what is then good or bad, what they can put them in our minds. But anyway, they can cause us this great discomfort. This is why words do matter, even not words externally, but also internally.
Thank you, Joe. All right, so we're coming up to the 10 o'clock mark. So Amon and Jason, if you have any comments, please go ahead and make them, and then we'll go to Pei Chi. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I was actually about to put it in the chat, but somebody asked, referring to the Tao as a blank canvas, I was about to warn them, careful, you're dangerously close to trying to define the Tao, which is just not doable. That's what we learned right in verse 1 of the Dao De Jing. But since we're doing the De Ching, that lesson may have lagged. Yeah, talking about the Tao is a wonderful exercise. Just don't ever dilute yourself into thinking, now I've conceptualized it. No, you haven't. You got close. The special effects budget of Industrial Light and Magic helps, but still, you don't have it. It's bigger than that. It's more than that. The other thing I like to say is I love the discourse, because the more opinions, the more we all get to actually learn. The more actual aha light bulb moments everybody gets to have, and that's great. Every one of those is valuable. Please, nobody ever feel like you should be hesitant to speak up. Your opinion matters to the group as much as anyone else's. I appreciate everybody doing this without me last week. I'm grateful to be back, and hopefully I won't be missing you,
Amon. We missed you.
There was some tragedy in my neck of the woods, but
that's all right. That's all right. It's just it's like you add so much to the discussion. I really appreciate that.
It's part of the landscape, part of what to expect if you're an educator.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm grateful for you all, and I will see you next week. So Mamanzo, everyone have it. Oh, and Xinyin Kuala, everybody, Year of the Dragon. Go enjoy it.
Thank you. Next up is Jason, and then we will start the conversation with Pei Chi. Go ahead, Jason.
Thank you, everyone. It's always a joy to hear and to know everyone. And just like Armand said, every words everybody said, your opinion is great. Really thank everyone, because I constantly modify the translation. Everyone said sometimes influence me. Sometimes I just go against your opinion, but it's also considered as contribution. And I really also appreciate a lot of people, even some people don't speak anything, but I believe we will probably make some mark on the person. And you have any thought, really, really is welcome to let us know. And I believe everyone is learning. And thank you, everyone. And I will see you next week. Okay.
Thank you, Jason. All right, Pei Chi. So, what would you like